Hi, my name is Alan Ross. I'm a program manager in Microsoft Azure's Compliance Engineering Group, specializing in financial services. Today, we're going to talk about how Microsoft's approach to compliance aligns with the financial services approach to compliance. We're going to introduce a brand new compliance program that's launching today as part of AzureCon, and then close with resources and next steps. So let's start with how the financial services industry looks at compliance. The financial services industry is one of the most regulated industries on the planet. And so it's important to look at what the financial services regulators want. First and foremost, they want visibility into financial institutions' risk management approach, what their posture is, what the financial institution's visibility is into their own vendors' risk management posture. They also want to make sure that financial institutions have full accountability over all of their IT systems. And they want to make sure that even in the case where a financial institution is outsourcing a portion of their IT operations, the financial institution understands that they still own the accountability of that system. We have thousands of financial institutions on Azure today, and through talking to them, a number of common themes come up. One of the biggest themes that we see is how important it is for these institutions to partner with Microsoft. They want to ensure that we're looking at their business challenges and collectively addressing them rather than looking at, here's what a customer is responsible for, here's what Microsoft's responsible for. And that introduces the trusted cloud principles, which are our approach to satisfying the requirements of this industry: security, privacy and control, compliance, and transparency. We're going to focus on compliance today, but these are all pivots around some of the same concepts. And it's all built on trust. We recognize that for a customer to take their core business workloads and move them into Azure, it requires some trust on both sides. And these principles are all designed around establishing that trust. Now let's talk about Azure's approach to compliance. Microsoft has invested deeply in ensuring that we have the largest compliance portfolio in the industry. From global regulations like ISO and PCI to NIST-based regulations in the United States to regional standards like the EU model clauses. But the one thing that we hear consistently is that certification is necessary but not sufficient. The conversation doesn't stop once we have certification. That's where the conversation starts. Customers come to us when they're looking for the economies of scale that come with a multi-tenant public cloud infrastructure. We have to reconcile those requirements with the traditional processes that are associated with compliance and audit. In doing so, we align to the same guiding principles that are used in software: automation, standardization, aligning to a calendar and optimizing that calendar so that we don't have an audit going on at the same time as a product launch, for example. These are necessary for us to adapt those traditional models to the hyperscale cloud environment. An additional level of transparency is also needed for the financial services industry. Ideally, we would take the same types of evidence that these customers are used to getting on-prem and build that into the product. So things like security audit logs, the things that are fully controlled by customers in on-prem environment, we build that into Azure so that customers can self-service and pull that same type of information themselves. Then there's also things that can't be built into the product, things like an attestation of compliance, which we publish in our Trust Center. Then there are also types of evidence that have to be controlled. Our SOC reports, for example, are dictated by our auditors in how we track and distribute those. But ideally, any evidence would fit into one of those three buckets. We do find in discussing evidence with customers and regulators that there's some evidence that they need that doesn't already exist in one of those buckets, and we refer to that as exception content. Our model when we look at any of those requests is, if this customer or this regulator is asking for this piece of evidence, it's likely that another customer or another regulator is going to be interested in it as well. And so we look at how we can automate the production of that evidence and how it can be pushed into one of the three more standard buckets. A frequent question that we get is, how does responsibility and accountability work when I take a system that I'm used to managing and maintaining in an on-prem or a dedicated hosted environment and move that over to a public multi-tenant environment? It's important to look at that from an IaaS and a PaaS perspective. So even though a financial institution is responsible for all layers in the stack in an on-prem environment, and they have accountability over all those layers in the stack, they may distribute the responsibility so that they have a team that's responsible for storage, a team that's responsible for virtualization. That same arrangement is exactly how it works when you move into Azure. So for example, if you take a virtual machine that's sitting in an on-prem environment and you lift it and drop it into Azure, the same layers of the stack within that operating system and above are the same layers that you're responsible for. Microsoft doesn't have any additional level of visibility into the operations, the patch level that goes on, or the services that sit inside that virtual machine. So the customer still maintains responsibility. Microsoft does take responsibility over the layers of the stack below the operating system, the virtualization layers and below. And similarly for platform as a service, Microsoft now takes on additional layers of the stack. Another common theme that comes up is all around risk management. Microsoft treats risk management as a first-class citizen, just like our financial services customers do. At the VP level, our owners of risk management have deep ties in with our business owners and our VPs that own Azure and our other cloud platforms. So if you look at the type of risk involved with a platform like Azure, things like fault tolerance and natural disasters, the type of risks that we track, those get rolled up to the corporate level alongside risks like piracy has to our core business models. And then the same views and dashboards that we provide up to our CEO and to our board of directors is all consistent. I'm now pleased to give you some details on a new compliance program that we're launching today as part of AzureCon. The Financial Services Compliance Program has been tailored specifically to our financial services customers and regulators. This takes the customer-vendor relationship to the next level and allows your security and compliance teams to interact directly with Microsoft security and compliance teams. So where we might produce an audit report from a third-party auditor, hundreds of pages of documentation on the inner workings of Azure and the controls that we have in place, customers are often interested in the evidence that went into that report. We have a mechanism and a team within compliance engineering that is designated for fielding those requests and responding to those inquiries. We then extend that same process to a customer's designated regulators. So if a customer tells us that a certain regulator has authority over their environment, we'll respect requests from those regulators in the same way that we would respect them coming from the customer. That includes things like our penetration testing results. So even though our audit reports will detail from the third party's assessment of how our controls held up in those audit reports, in those penetration testing reports, we'll actually provide the penetration testing results, those reports themselves, to the customers. We also have exclusive events at Microsoft headquarters, webcasts after audits, all designed to satisfy the regulatory requirements of this industry. And it's not just documented on our website. We contractually commit to these things through a standardized contract that's been iterated and refined through hundreds of customers in the financial services industry, to the point where we can standardize on this and we can scale it. Finally, let's talk about resources and next steps. You should definitely subscribe to the Azure blog. That's the primary place we'll be pointing you to additional features that come out, different resources that we will make available for our financial services customers. check out our compliance portfolio on the Azure Trust Center, and review our Azure Bill of Materials at aka.ms/AzureBOM. The Bill of Materials contains high-level guidance on how Microsoft does security and privacy compliance in the cloud, down to very specific guidance on how to configure the service for security and audit logging. Thanks so much for your time today, and we'll see you at the next AzureCon.